The pop of hundreds of camera flashes felt like machine gun fire. They weren't aimed at me, his devoted wife of 15 years. They were aimed at my husband as he publicly kissed his new marketing director right on the red carpet of our own charity ball. He thought it was his power debut. He didn't know that in 10 minutes. I'd be on that stage, not as the abandoned wife, but as the sole controller of his trust. Tonight, I'm donating his entire fortune. My name is Eliza Vance. The Lumina Center in Boston was designed to intimidate. Its grand hall, all soaring steel beams and glass, felt less like a building and more like a modern cathedral built to worship money. Tonight, it was our church, the stage for the Thorn Foundation's annual charity ball. And it was packed. Hundreds of people, a curated sea of Boston's old money, new tech, and the political sharks that fed on both, milled about, their voices a dull roar under the crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with the competing scents of expensive perfume and the metallic tang of ambition. Outside, beyond the massive glass facade, the red carpet was a war zone of flashing lights, a gauntlet I had walked for 15 years. I arrived alone. My car, a modest Lexus, pulled up right at 7:30, and I stepped out into the crisp November air. The sapphire silk of my gown felt cool against my skin. It was a simple dress, elegant but severe, sleeveless and high-necked. I had chosen it specifically for the color, the deep, cold blue of a glacial crevasse. I was 42 years old, and I had long perfected the art of looking composed, of being the elegant, stable backdrop to my husband's volatile genius. Tonight, that art would be my armor. The press pit was already humming, but their interest in me was polite, almost rote. "Eliza, over here. Mrs. Vance, love the dress." I gave them the smile I had practiced, the one that was warm at the edges but offered nothing. I was halfway up the steps when I heard the guttural roar of his car. A matte black Ferrari screamed to a halt, cutting off a town car. The valets flinched. Marcus, my husband of 15 years, emerged. He was 45, but dressed like a man desperate to be 30. His tuxedo was tailored to within an inch of its life, and he wore no tie. He was all energy and ego, a human wrecking ball, but he wasn't alone. He reached back into the car and pulled her out. Serafina Rivers, 28 years old, his new marketing director, and, as of this moment, his public statement. She was poured into a red dress so bright it hurt the eyes, a stark, vulgar slash against the elegant backdrop of the Lumina. She held his hand, her knuckles white, a picture of nervous, triumphant ascension. A change rippled through the media. It was instantaneous. The polite hum aimed at me became a frantic, shark-like frenzy. The hundreds of lenses swiveled as one. You could feel the collective intake of breath. This was not on the program. I stopped. I was only a few yards away, standing on the landing, just inside the main doors. I had the perfect vantage point. I did not move, did not turn to hide. I simply stood and watched. Marcus saw me. Of course he did. He scanned the crowd, his eyes hungry for the reaction, and found me. He locked his gaze on mine, a silent challenge. I saw the arrogant tilt of his head, the smirk playing on his lips. This entire spectacle was for me. He wanted this. He wanted the public humiliation. Then, in a moment of such profound narcissistic arrogance it almost took my breath away, he acted. He grabbed Serafina by the arm, yanked her close, and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a performance of possession. He devoured her, his hand tangling in her hair, bending her backward in a grotesque parody of a classic Hollywood embrace. It was a kiss designed to be photographed, to be printed, to be seen. It was a branding iron marking her as his and me as obsolete. The world exploded in light. The sound of the camera shutters was not a click, but a roar, A deafening, continuous rattle like machine gun fire. Shouts erupted. Marcus, Mr. Thorne, who is she? Over here, Seraphina. They knew her name. Of course they did. I did not cry. I did not flinch. I did not so much as breathe. I just watched, my blood turning to ice in my veins. My gaze cut through the chaos, through the strobing lights, and I held his eyes. He broke the kiss, his lips still glistening, and looked directly at me. Through the din, across the distance, I read his lips. 2 words, sharp and clear. It's done. It was a declaration of war, a final cruel severing, the end of Eliza Vance, a reporter, a young woman with wild eyes and a handheld recorder, broke from the pack and scrambled up the steps toward me. She shoved the recorder in my face, her voice shrill. Mrs. Vance, Mrs. Vance, do you have any comment on your husband? I turned my head, not to her, but past her. I gave her the ghost of a smile, a polite, meaningless twitch of the lips. I said nothing. I ignored the microphone, the frantic questions, the entire chaotic tableau, with a calm I did not know I possessed. I turned my back on the scene. I left my husband and his mistress to drown in the spotlight he had so desperately craved. I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped into the warm, gilded ballroom. The noise of the red carpet was instantly muffled, replaced by the soft strings of a quartet and the polite murmur of the Boston elite. He thinks he just detonated the bomb. He has no idea he just lit his own fuse. 9 o'clock. Exactly 9 o'clock, I thought, as I smoothed the sapphire silk of my gown. Everything will be over. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray, the bubbles a pointless fizz on my tongue. The string quartet was playing Vivaldi, a piece I had chosen. Everything here, I had chosen. The floral arrangements, the catering, the precise shade of lighting. I was the architect of this room, just as I had been the architect of the man now destroying me. 15 years ago, I was not Mrs. Vance, the philanthropist's wife. I was Eliza Croft, one of the sharpest PR strategists at a top-tier Boston firm. I was on the fast track, the one they gave the impossible clients, the one who could spin disaster into gold. And then I met Marcus Thorne. He was brilliant, a chaotic whirlwind of genius locked inside the most socially awkward man I had ever met. He was an engineer, pure and simple. He had an idea, something about green tech and sustainable energy grids, an idea that could genuinely change the world, but he could not sell it. He spoke in code and formulas, his hair was always a mess, and he wore mismatched socks to his first ever pitch meeting, a meeting I had attended with my boss. My boss saw a lost cause. I saw a project. I saw a diamond buried in 20 feet of mud. I fell in love with the idea first, and then, slowly, with the man. I saw his passion, the raw, unfiltered belief in his work. He was captivating. Once you got past the well, everything else, I left my job. My colleagues thought I was insane. You're giving up a partnership for him, my boss had asked, his voice dripping with condescension. I just smiled, already calculating the angles. I was not giving up anything. I was upgrading. I was building my own. I took the raw material of Marcus Thorne and I began to sculpt. It started with the basics. No, Marcus, you cannot wear a polo shirt to meet a banker. Ever. I threw out his entire wardrobe and replaced it with custom-tailored suits. I taught him which fork to use, how to hold a wine glass, how to make eye contact when he was speaking. I became his voice. His first major presentations were my words, flowing from his lips. I wrote the speeches, crafting narratives that made sustainable energy sound not just smart, but heroic. I sat in the back of conference rooms, mouthing the words with him, giving him subtle hand signals when he started to rush or dive too deep into technical jargon. Thorne Innovations was born on our tiny apartment floor, me with a laptop and him with a whiteboard. I designed the logo myself. a sleek green leaf integrated into a circuit board. Simple, powerful, digestible. I cashed in every favor I had. I called old contacts, mentors, even former rivals. "You have to meet him," I would say, my voice smooth with a confidence he had yet to earn. "He's the next big thing." I used my credibility to buy him his. I got him in the door with the first-tier venture capitalists, the ones who would have shredded the before Marcus in 30 seconds. I sat outside those glass-walled meeting rooms, my heart pounding, until he would burst out, stunned and ecstatic. "They're in. Ellie. They're in for 5 million. I was the invisible brain. I was the ghost in his machine. As the company grew, I transitioned him from engineer to visionary. When the media started calling, I was the one who coached him, turning his dense engineering speak into sound bites. I crafted the public persona of Marcus Thorne, the reluctant genius, the man who just wanted to save the planet. The Thorne Foundation was my masterpiece. The company was successful, but it was aggressive, and Marcus, fueled by his new confidence, was making enemies. "We need to soften your image," I told him, 2 years after we hit our first 100 million in revenue. "We need to show you're giving back." The environmental charity was the perfect PR tool, a way to launder his corporate ruthlessness into a philanthropic legacy. I ran everything else, our lives, our home. I found the perfect historical brownstone on Beacon Hill and oversaw its renovation, ensuring it was a suitable backdrop for magazine spreads and investor dinners. I managed our social calendar, deciding which parties to attend and which to skip, who we should be seen with. We never had children. It was a quiet, mutual understanding. The company was our child, and it was a demanding, jealous one. In the early days, he knew his debt to me. He was endlessly grateful, almost reverent. In the quiet of the night, after a major success, he would pull me close and whisper it. "You're my foundation, Ellie. You are the ground I stand on. Without you, I'm nothing. None of this exists without you." I would smile, thinking it was the ultimate compliment. Now, standing in the ballroom I had decorated, with the sound of Vivaldi I had chosen washing over me, I finally understood. He was right. I was his foundation. And a foundation is the thing you are meant to stand on, the thing you crush under your own weight as you build yourself higher. It is the part of the building that no one ever sees, the part that lives in the dark and the cold, taken for granted until the day you decide to abandon the whole structure and walk away. The chill began about 18 months ago. It was not a sudden frost, but a slow, creeping cold that settled deep into the foundations of our marriage. It started, as most things did, with the company. Thorne Innovations had just landed a massive contract with a European consortium, a deal that put us on the global stage. It was a victory I had helped orchestrate, spending weeks refining the pitch, coaching Marcus on cultural nuances. He flew to Geneva for the final signing. He came back a different man. At first, the changes were subtle. He started taking business trips with increasing frequency. It was always Zurich, then Geneva, then back to Zurich. "They are our biggest partners now. Ellie," he said, his voice clipped with a new kind of self-importance. "I have to keep them happy. This is high stakes." He, who had once left his laptop open on the kitchen counter for anyone to see, suddenly became a fortress of digital security. His phone, which he used to leave on his bedside table, now never left his pocket, not even when he showered. It was angled away from me when he texted, a constant, furtive flash of light in his hand. He bought a new laptop, a sleek silver model, and told me it was for high-security company files only. Then came the safe. I walked into his home office one afternoon to find 2 men installing a heavy, black steel box in the wall behind a painting. "What is this?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the large room. "New security protocols," he said, not looking up from his desk. "The board insists. We're dealing with proprietary patents worth billions." What's the code? He finally looked at me, and his eyes were flat, devoid of the warmth I once knew. It's need to know. Ellie, don't worry about it. I was the vice president of his foundation, the co-founder of his image, his wife of over a decade, and I did not need to know. The physical distance grew into a chasm. The man who once could not fall asleep without his hand on my hip now slept rigidly on his edge of the bed, a clear 6 inches of cold linen between us. When I tried to initiate contact, to bridge that gap, he would sigh, a long, weary sound. Ellie, please. I'm exhausted. The pressure from these investors is crushing. He made pressure and stress sound like terminal illnesses, excuses that could not be questioned. The intimacy we shared vanished, replaced by a polite, sterile roommate agreement. Then she arrived. He hired Serafina Rivers about 8 months ago. She was a former runway model who had, according to the press release I was not asked to review, pivoted to marketing. He introduced her at a company-wide meeting, his hand lingering just a little too long on her back. Serafina is going to bring a much-needed injection of new energy to our branding, he announced. She was new energy. All right. She was everything I was not. Young, brash, with a body that looked poured from silicone and a laugh that was loud and aggressively flirtatious. The credit card bills were the next clue. I still managed the household finances, a relic of my former control. I started seeing charges, small at first, then larger, a single $5,000 charge from Cartier. When I asked, he waved his hand dismissively. Gifts for the consortium wives? You know how the Swiss are. It's just part of the game. But I had never known him to buy gifts. I was the one who bought the gifts, who had them wrapped, who wrote the polite, personalized cards. Then came the dinners, Delmonico's, Moo, restaurants I had booked for our anniversaries, now appearing on the statements for Tuesday nights when he was supposedly working late with the board. He was not taking clients to these places. He was taking her. I began to feel like a ghost in my own home. The magnificent Beacon Hill brownstone I had so lovingly restored. I was a high-end decoration. I was useful for hosting the big parties, for smiling at his side on the charity circuit, the living embodiment of his stability and philanthropic spirit. But in our day-to-day life, I was invisible. I was the foundation, and he had built a whole new penthouse level that I was not allowed to enter. The suspicion became a physical thing, a knot in my stomach that never unwound. It was there when he smiled at his phone. It was there when he came home late, smelling faintly of a perfume that was not mine, a sharp, musky scent that clung to his suit jacket. The final, undeniable proof came 3 weeks before I would stumble upon his digital life. It was a Sunday afternoon. He was, naturally, in Zurich. I was gathering his suits from the week for the dry cleaner, a wifely chore I still performed out of habit. I went through his pockets, a mindless check for pens or receipts. My fingers brushed against something small and cold in the breast pocket of his favorite Armani jacket. I pulled it out. It was a single cufflink. It was heavy, made of solid gold, and designed as a small, intricate knot. It was not his. I knew every single piece of jewelry Marcus owned. I had bought most of it. His style was modern, sleek, minimalist brushed platinum, simple squares, onyx. This cufflink was ornate, almost gaudy. It was something an older European man might wear, or perhaps it was a gift. I stood in the silence of our oversized closet, the gold warm in my palm, and the truth settled over me like a shroud. He was not just cheating. This was not a simple, grubby affair. This was something else. This was a plan. I could feel it, the same way I could feel a shift in the market or a weakness in a PR strategy. I slipped the cufflink back into the pocket. I did not take the suit to the cleaner. I left it hanging in his closet, a silent, glittering accusation that he never even noticed. The detonation happened 4 months before the ball. It was a Tuesday. I remember the light in the kitchen was that specific, flat gray of a Boston afternoon, promising rain. Marcus was in a frantic hurry, packing for another last-minute trip to Zurich. "Ellie, have you seen my new tablet?" he yelled from the bedroom. "The one I just bought. I think the housekeeper put it in the kitchen. Darling." I called back, my voice the perfect helpful wife's chime. I heard him clatter down the stairs. He was late for his flight. He found the new tablet, still in its box, on the kitchen island. I was in the pantry, pretending to look for something. I watched him tear the box open, his movements jerky and impatient. He plugged it in, cursed when it took a moment to boot up, and started jabbing at the screen, setting it up. "Damn it, come on," he muttered. He was clearly trying to link it to his accounts, his face tight with irritation. He must have been in such a rush, so focused on getting his new toy ready for his trip, that he made the single most stupid mistake of his life. In his haste, he did not log into his private, secure account. He logged into the family cloud, the one we had set up a decade ago to share photos, calendars, and household lists, the one I still used. "Got it," he said, shoving the tablet into his briefcase. He ran to the door. "I'll be back Friday. Don't wait up." He kissed the air, missing my cheek by a good 3 inches, and was gone. The door slammed, rattling the old glass in the entryway. I waited. I made myself a cup of tea. I counted to 100. That evening, the house was silent, wrapped in the cold rain he had escaped. At about 8 o'clock, I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of wine, and picked up the old family iPad, the one that sat on a charger by the cookbooks. My only intention was to review the guest list for the charity ball. It was 4 months away, and I needed to finalize the seating charts. I opened the device, and the world ended. His new tablet, now thousands of feet over the Atlantic, was sinking. It was pouring his entire secret life directly into the cloud, and the family iPad was receiving it all. A text message notification popped up at the top of the screen. Not a normal blue bubble. It was from a secure app I did not recognize. The sender was S. The message, "Can't wait to have you all to myself. My love, is the old bat packed your bags?" My heart stopped. Then it started again, a sick, heavy lurch in my chest. My fingers, acting of their own accord, clicked the notification. It opened a river of filth. Hundreds, no, thousands of messages. Years of them. It was not just texts. It was photos. Serafina, naked in hotel rooms I recognized from our own travels. Voicemails, dripping with explicit promises. It was a complete, sordid archive of his betrayal. I sat down, hard, on the kitchen stool, the cold marble seeping through my clothes. I read. I scrolled back, past the recent loving messages, to the ones from months ago, and I saw it was not just an affair. It was a plan. S. Are you sure she'll be crushed? She seems so cold. M. She's not cold. She's a piece of furniture, and I'm going to make sure this is public. The ball. It's the perfect stage, our debut. S. What about the divorce she's going to fight? M. She can't fight what she doesn't know. My lawyers are drafting the settlement. It's generous. She'll get the house and a payout, maybe $5 million. She'll sign. She's a pragmatist. $5 million. He was valuing my 15 years, my career, my entire life's work, at $5 million. He was going to humiliate me at my own event, the one I had built from nothing, and then file for divorce the next morning, buying my silence with a cheap settlement. I felt the nausea rise, but I pushed it down. This was not the time for emotion. This was the time for information. I kept reading. I exited the messages and went into his synced files. He was a fool. He was an arrogant, sloppy fool. He had not even bothered to name the folder something discreet. Asset restructure. I opened it. It was not a divorce plan. It was a corporate execution. My PR-trained mind, the mind that built his empire, clicked into high gear. The sickness faded, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged clarity. I was not looking at a husband's betrayal. I was looking at a federal crime. Marcus was not just hiding assets. He was liquidating his own company. There were contracts, spreadsheets, bank transfers. He had been busy on his trips to Switzerland. He had established three shell corporations in Zurich and Liechtenstein. The names were meaningless, but the directors were not. One of them was Serafina Rivers. The plan was laid out in a series of memos I realized he had dictated, his voice full of that same arrogant energy. He was using Thorn Innovations, the company I had named, as a sacrificial lamb. He was systematically selling off our most valuable assets, the green technology patents that I had helped him register, the ones that were the very soul of the company, to his own shell companies, and he was selling them for pennies on the dollar. One contract showed a patent portfolio worth an estimated $50 million sold to Fidel AG for $100,000. But that was not the end. A separate set of contracts showed Fidel AG, now directed by Serafina, turning around and selling that same portfolio to one of Thorn Innovations' largest competitors in Europe for $10 million, and that was just one deal. He was gutting his own company from the inside out. He was defrauding his investors, the people I had brought to his door. He was committing international wire fraud and evading tens of millions of dollars in taxes. He was not just planning to leave me. He was planning to scorch the earth, to burn down the entire life we had built, steal the hundreds of millions in profit, and disappear with his 28-year-old marketing director, leaving me, his investors, and his employees with nothing but the smoldering ruins. I looked at the kitchen clock. It was almost midnight. I had been sitting there for 4 hours, the wine untouched, the iPad hot in my hands. He did not just want a new life. He wanted to erase the old one. And he wanted to make sure I was the one who paid the price for it all. I closed the iPad. I put it back on its charger. I went to the sink and calmly washed my wine glass, dried it, and put it away. I was not the wife. I was not the victim. I was the architect. And he had just given me the blueprints to his, and my, new future. I did not confront him. I did not break a single plate. I did not scream, or cry, or throw the damning evidence in his face. That is what he would have expected. That is what Serafina, in her text, had called cold Eliza's reaction. They expected a scene, a messy, emotional collapse. I would not give them the satisfaction. I went upstairs, walked into our bedroom, and got into bed. I straightened the sheets, set my alarm for 6:30, and turned off the light. I lay in the dark, my hands clasped on my chest, and I did not sleep. I planned. The rage did not leave me. It simply changed. It was a white-hot, molten fury that, as the hours passed, cooled and hardened. By the time my alarm went off, the fury was gone, replaced by something infinitely more dangerous, a solid, dense, and perfectly cold purpose. The emotional wife had died in the kitchen at midnight. The PR strategist was back. I got up, made coffee, and when Marcus finally stumbled downstairs for his flight, I was there with a smile. "Darling, you forgot your new tablet on the counter. I put it in your briefcase for you, and I packed your favorite cashmere socks." He grunted, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. "Thanks, Ellie. You're a lifesaver." "Just have a safe flight," I said, kissing his rough cheek. "We'll see you Friday." I watched him get into the car, and I felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt a profound sense of clarity. He had given me the weapon, and he had given me the timeline. The ball was 4 months away. I had 120 days to dismantle the man I had built. My performance began that day. I became the most devoted wife in Boston. I was Eliza, perfected. I anticipated his needs before he knew them. I made his favorite meals. I listened with rapt attention as he complained about investor pressure, all the while knowing he was the one robbing them blind. When he prepared for his Swiss trips, I became his personal valet. I would lay out his suits, freshly dry-cleaned. "This one, Marcus," I'd say, holding up a dark gray Xenia. "It makes you look so powerful for your meetings." I would fold his shirts, the crisp white cotton smelling of the lavender rinse I knew he liked, the same shirts he would wear as Serafina ran her hands over them. I would pack his bag, a meticulous arrangement of his toiletries, his workout gear, and yes, his silk pajamas. I was packing the bag he was taking to his mistress's bed, and I did it with a serene, loving smile. "What would I do without you, Ellie?" he asked one afternoon, zipping the bag I had just packed. "You'd be a mess," I said, patting his chest, and we both knew it was true, just in different ways. My other project was the ball. I threw myself into the planning with a manic, almost terrifying enthusiasm. Before, I had treated it as a necessary part of the job. Now, I treated it as my primary function. "Eliza, you're a whirlwind," our event planner said, breathless, during a tasting. "I've never seen you this excited about a centerpiece." "It's our biggest year yet," I said, my voice bright. "Everything has to be perfect. Absolutely perfect." Marcus was delighted by my newfound domesticity and my passion for the ball. He saw it as proof that I was oblivious, that I was settling into my role as the perfect, simple-minded society wife. The more I fussed over flowers and seating charts, the more he relaxed. He became sloppy, leaving his secure laptop on his desk, convinced I had no interest in the boring, high-level work. About 2 months before the event, I made my move. We were in the drawing room, him with a whiskey, me with my ever-present seating chart. "Marcus, darling," I began, my voice casual. "I've been thinking about the speeches for the ball." "What about them?" he said, distracted by a text on his phone. Probably from her. "Well, you are the face. You should absolutely do the welcome. But you're going to be so busy, greeting the governor, talking to the new donors from the consortium." I let the sentence hang. I was thinking, perhaps I should take the main speech, the one about the foundation's work. It would free you up to network. And, well, I'd like to feel I'm truly contributing this year. I watched him. I saw the calculations flicker behind his eyes. He looked at me, really looked at me. This dutiful, simple woman obsessed with flower arrangements. He saw the perfect setup, his wife, on stage, talking about their shared legacy, just moments before he would publicly disown her with a kiss. The humiliation would be exquisite. His devoted wife, up there, playing her part, while he was in the audience, holding his new life by the hand. It was the kind of cruel, cinematic irony he would adore. He smiled, a slow, predatory smile. "Ellie, that's a wonderful idea. Truly. I think it's time you had your moment in the spotlight. Yes, you should definitely be the keynote." "Oh, thank you. Marcus, that means so much to me," I said, beaming. "My pleasure, darling," he said, turning back to his phone. The next day, I took a cab to a different part of town. I paid in cash for a burner phone and the cheapest laptop the electronics store had. Then, I went to Back Bay. I used cash to rent a small, windowless office by the month in a drab building with a dozen other anonymous businesses. I paid for a new, secure internet line, also in cash, under a name I'd invented just for the occasion. I sat in the small, beige room, with its single metal desk and wobbly chair, and I booted up the new laptop. I had 4 months. Now, I had my war room, I had the evidence, I had the stage, and I had his overconfident, arrogant permission. The devoted wife was my cover. The architect was back at work. My first move from the beige, windowless room was not to a divorce attorney. Marcus's plan involved a generous $5 million payout. He was viewing this through the lens of marital law, a simple, transactional split. He was a fool. A divorce attorney would fight for a bigger piece of the marital pie. I was no longer interested in the pie. I wanted the entire bakery, the trucks, the supply chain, and the land it was all built on. He had not committed a marital error. He had committed a federal crime. And for that, you do not call a specialist in alimony. You call a specialist in financial evisceration. It took me 3 days of cross-referencing legal journals, federal court dockets, and articles from the financial underworld to find her. Her name was Juliana Croft. She had no flashy website, no society page mentions. She had a 10-year record as a federal prosecutor in the white-collar crime division, where she had dismantled 2 hedge funds and sent a Swiss banking executive to prison. Her conviction rate was 98%. In the circles that mattered, she was known only by a nickname, the Wolf. She left the DOJ 2 years ago to open a private firm that specialized in one thing: large-scale, international asset recovery. I booked a consultation under my invented name, the one on my burner phone. Her office was in a boring, steel and glass building in the financial district, the kind of place you would never look at twice. The office itself was Spartan: a concrete floor, a large desk, and a window that overlooked a brick wall. Juliana Croft was in her 50s, with short, silver hair and eyes so dark and intelligent they seemed to absorb all the light in the room. She wore a simple black dress and no jewelry. She did not smile. "You have 30 minutes, Ms. Smith," she said, her voice a low, precise monotone. "The clock is running." I sat down. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I reached into my bag and placed a single encrypted USB drive on her desk. "I am not Ms. Smith," I said. "My name is Eliza Vance. My husband is Marcus Thorne of Thorne Innovations." Her eyes flickered. A bare minimum of interest. "The philanthropist. I've read about your ball." "Good," I said. "My husband is planning to publicly humiliate me at that ball in 4 months. He is also planning to divorce me the next morning, offering me a $5 million settlement." "A decent payout," Juliana said, her face impassive. "So you're here to fight for 1015. If so, you've wasted your time. I don't handle divorces." "I know," I said, sliding the USB drive across the desk. "I don't want a divorce. I want everything. I want the company. I want the foundation. And I want to see him in a courtroom that has nothing to do with family law." She looked at me, then at the drive. She plugged it into a dedicated air-gapped laptop on her credenza. She put on a pair of simple reading glasses and began to read. I sat in complete silence for 20 minutes. The only sound was the faint click of her trackpad. I watched her. Her expression never changed, but her focus was absolute, a palpable force. She scrolled through the contracts. She opened the spreadsheets. She read the texts. Finally, she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at the laptop, then at me. And then, a small, terrifying smile cracked her face. It was the first human emotion I had seen from her. "Mrs. Vance," she said, and the tone was no longer monotone. It was warm, almost delighted. "Your husband isn't just an adulterer. He's a spectacularly stupid federal criminal. This is a gift." She stood up and walked to the window, energized. "He's committing wire fraud, tax evasion, and he's defrauding his own corporate partners. This isn't a divorce case. This is a RICO case wrapped in a white-collar bow. You don't need a divorce lawyer. You need a team." She turned back to me. "But this digital evidence isn't enough to seize control. It's enough to get an indictment." "Sure. But you said you want everything. To do that, we need to prove he is not only criminal, but mentally and legally incompetent to manage his own assets. We need to follow the money, not just see the receipts. We need to find the accounts he thinks are hidden." "How?" I asked. "We bring in Benning," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Even I knew the name. Mr. Benning. He was a legend, a ghost, a forensic accountant who had supposedly been retired for a decade. He was the man the government called when they knew the money was there but just could not find it. "He's not retired," Juliana said. "He's just bored. He only takes cases that are interesting. And this, Mrs. Vance, is very interesting. He can find money that's been burned to ash and scattered in the ocean. He'll love this. He'll love your husband's arrogance." The plan was formed right there, in that Spartan office. It was not a divorce strategy. It was a hostile takeover. Juliana's team would handle the legal side, operating from the shadows. They would use my evidence to get the necessary secret court orders. Benning would be unleashed on the Swiss bank accounts. on the Liechtenstein shells, on Serafina's financials. Our goal, Juliana said, her eyes glittering, is not to argue over furniture. Our goal is to have the court declare him mentally unfit and legally compromised due to gross criminal malfeasance. We will argue that you, as co-founder of the foundation and his partner of 15 years, are the only one who can step in to protect the company and its investors from the CEO's catastrophic criminal behavior. He's not incompetent, I said. He's just cruel. The law has a beautifully flexible definition of incompetence, Juliana replied, and a man who sinks his entire criminal conspiracy to the family iPad fits it perfectly. Go home, Mrs. Vance, play the part, be the devoted wife, plan your party. Benning and I will go hunting. As I left her office, I felt the last lingering trace of the victim evaporate. The wolf was on my side, and we had 4 months until the ball. Mr. Benning was not a man. He was a bloodhound. He did not operate from an office, but from a secure server that Juliana gave me access to via my burner laptop. My windowless room in Back Bay became a portal into the dark, hidden architecture of my husband's greed. Benning worked with a speed and precision that was terrifying. He was not just an accountant, he was a digital archaeologist. Within a week, he had confirmed my suspicions from the iPad, but added layers I could never have imagined. He's arrogant, Juliana said, summarizing Benning's first report during one of our coded call check-ins. We never met in person after that first meeting. That's the fatal flaw, and arrogance leaves a trail. The first breadcrumb was Serafina. Benning had run her name through a dozen international databases. She was not just the mistress. She was a key player. She was listed as the sole director of Fidele AG, the Liechtenstein shell company that was buying our patents for pennies. She was the one signing the contracts to sell them to our competitors for millions. She was not just a girlfriend, she was a co-conspirator. The charges against her were piling up as well. The second breadcrumb was even better. Marcus's arrogance was truly breathtaking. To draft the contracts transferring the patents from Thorn Innovations to Fidel AG, he had not hired an outside, discreet law firm. He had used his own in-house counsel, the legal team at Thorn Innovations. He used our guys, I asked, stunned. He used Gary. The man I hired 6 years ago, the very same, Juliana said. He probably told them it was a complex tax optimization strategy. They drafted the paperwork. He signed it. Benning found the internal memos. This is beautiful. Eliza. It means the company's own lawyers were witnesses to the fraud, even if they didn't know it. They kept records. Oh, they kept beautiful, meticulous records. But the true turning point, the discovery that shifted our entire strategy from a takeover to an execution, came 3 weeks later. Benning had been following the Swiss francs, tracing the money from the patent sales. But he was also looking at the other side of the ledger, the Thorn Foundation, my foundation. He found the leak. It was a slow, steady drip that had started about 6 months ago. Marcus, feeling invincible, had started using the foundation's assets as his personal piggy bank. He had been siphoning money from the charity's endowment, not in large, obvious chunks, but in a series of consulting fees and administrative expenses paid to a different shell company, this one based in the Caymans. And this company, Benning discovered, was also controlled by Serafina. Marcus was taking money meant for environmental causes, money I had raised, and using it to buy his mistress jewelry and fund their lavish trips. He was taking out loans against the foundation's stock portfolio to put a down payment on a villa in Lake Como he had put in Serafina's name. It was not just fraud. It was not just tax evasion. This was embezzlement. This was the theft of charitable funds. It was a federal crime so blatant, so morally bankrupt, that it changed everything. Juliana's voice, when she called me with this news, was sharp with the thrill of the hunt. This is it, Eliza. This is the kill shot. Forget incompetence. This is pure, unadulterated criminal malfeasance. The board cannot ignore this. The board. The investors I had personally wooed, the ones I had convinced to bet on Marcus. It's time to bring them in, Juliana said. We'll pick two, the ones with the most to lose, the ones who hate him the most. We chose our targets carefully. Arthur Wembley, an old-money Bostonian who had invested $30 million, and Koji Tanaka, a tech investor from California who controlled another $40 million and sat on the board's ethics committee. Juliana approached them. Not me. It was done with surgical precision. She requested off-the-record meetings, presenting herself as a private investigator hired by a concerned party. She laid out only the information about the foundation. She did not mention the patent fraud. She did not mention Serafina. She just showed them the bank transfers, the consulting fees, the proof that Marcus Thorne was stealing from the charity set up in his own name. Their reaction was predictable and explosive. These were not fools. They were sharks who had just realized their lead shark was bleeding in the water and attracting their competitors. They were horrified, not just by the illegality, but by the sheer stupidity. Marcus was not just a crook, he was a bad crook, one who was threatening their investment and their reputations. They are in, Juliana told me, and they are furious. They secretly agreed to cooperate. Suddenly, our access was no longer limited to what Benning could find from the outside. Arthur and Koji gave us internal access. We now had server passwords, board meeting minutes, and internal emails. With this new arsenal, I, as co-founder and vice president of the Thorne Foundation, began the secret legal process. Juliana's team began filing emergency petitions under seal with the Massachusetts High Court, citing the irrefutable proof of embezzlement. We were petitioning for a temporary transfer of control, an emergency measure to protect the foundation from its compromised and criminal director. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place just last week, 1 week before the ball. Benning, now deep inside the company's financial mainframe, found it. A new, personal account. It was not in Switzerland or the Caymans. It was in Singapore. It was a brand new account, opened in Marcus's name alone, and it was empty. But Benning also found a scheduled wire transfer. On the night of the charity ball, at precisely 10 o'clock, a single transaction was set to move $50 million, the final payout from his competitors from the Liechtenstein Shell Company, directly into this new, personal Singapore account. It was his escape plan. He was going to stand on stage, introduce me, watch me be humiliated. And then, while I was giving my pathetic little speech, he was going to slip out, trigger the transfer, and be on a plane to a non-extradition country with Serafina before the first newspapers hit the stands. He's liquidating, Juliana said. This is it. The final move. $50 million, I whispered, staring at the screen in my little beige room. It's all there, Eliza, she said. Oh, we have the crime. We have the co-conspirators, we have the board members, and we have the final desperate escape. The judge has everything. We are ready. The final week before the ball was a masterclass in psychological warfare. The air in our Beacon Hill home was stretched thin, vibrating with an unspoken electric tension. Marcus was a disaster, a man split in two. Half of him was the arrogant, triumphant peacock, already preening for his public victory. The other half was a nervous, paranoid wreck, terrified his plan would unravel. He was short-tempered, jumpy, and drank far more than usual. He thought I did not notice. I noticed every tremor in his hand, every extra glass of whiskey he poured. He was a man checking his parachute 1,000 times before a jump, not realizing I had already replaced it with a bag of bricks. The moment came on Monday, 5 days before the ball. I was in the library, reviewing a final checklist for the event, my pen hovering over the lighting cues. Marcus walked in, holding a slim, leather-bound document folder. He was trying for casual, but his shoulders were squared, his jaw set. "Ellie, thank God you're in here," he said, his voice a false, breezy tone that set my teeth on edge. Just a small thing from legal. End-of-year tax restructuring. He slid the folder onto the antique mahogany desk, on top of my seating charts. It's just some corporate housekeeping, moving assets around for a better tax position. You know the drill. I looked at him, my face a mask of polite interest. The board's been pushing for it, he continued, lying with an ease that was almost artistic. Anyway, they just need your signature. As vice president of the foundation, it's just a formality. I picked up the folder. The leather was warm. I opened it. It was not a formality. It was 20 pages of dense, suffocating legalese. I did not need to read the whole thing. My eyes, trained to find the one-line kill shot in a press release, scanned the key clauses. In full and final consideration of all marital and corporate claims. A one-time, non-negotiable payment of $5 million. Hereby waives and relinquishes all future rights, titles, and interests, known and unknown, to any and all holdings of Thorne Innovations. There it was, the $5 million generous payout from his texts with Serafina. He was handing me the contract for my own surrender. He was asking me, his devoted, clueless wife, to sign away my 15 years of work, my intellectual property, the very company I had built from his chaotic genius for a fraction of its worth. He was trying to buy me off with my own money. A cold, clear rage, sharp as a diamond, settled in my chest. He was so arrogant, so convinced of my stupidity that he believed I would sign this, blind and smiling. I looked up. I gave him the smile I had perfected, the one that was warm, accommodating, and utterly empty. Of course, darling. I picked up the heavy, silver-plated pen from the desk set. I uncapped it. I saw his body relax, his shoulders drop half an inch. He was at the finish line. My hand, holding the pen, moved toward the document, and then I faltered. My elbow, in a move that felt both accidental and completely inevitable, jerked sideways. It struck my coffee mug, a full, steaming cup of black coffee I had brought in with me. The mug tipped. The dark liquid tidal waved across the desk, a flood of scalding brown that completely engulfed the leather folder. It poured over the pages, saturating the signature line, turning his perfect legal trap into a soggy, dripping, illegible mess. "Oh, no!" I gasped, jumping to my feet. The horror in my voice was entirely genuine, just not for the reasons he thought. "Marcus, look, the papers. Oh, my God. I am so clumsy. I've ruined it. I'm so sorry." His face was a masterpiece of barely controlled fury. A vein throbbed in his temple. He could not yell at me. Not when I was being so perfectly, apologetically incompetent. "Damn it, Ellie," he hissed, pulling the dripping folder from the puddle. The ink was running. This was the final copy. Legal needed this back by noon. No, it's okay," I said, my voice a flurry of helpfulness. I ran to the desk. "It's fine. You said it came from legal, right? It's just a document. They must have it on their computers. I'll call Gary's office right now. I'll tell them it was all my fault, and I'll have them email the file to me. I'll print it out right here. Good as new. It will be faster. Don't you worry." He stared at me, his jaw working. He was trapped by my efficiency. "Fine," he snapped. "Just do it, and try not to set this one on fire." I gave him a watery, remorseful smile and bustled out of the room, my heart hammering a victory beat. I did not go to the study. I went to my dressing room, locked the door, and took out the burner laptop from its hiding place. I logged onto the secure network and emailed Juliana. "He's making me sign a post-nup. He's handing it to me right now. A $5 million buyout." I attached the digital copy that Gary's assistant, full of pity for clumsy Mrs. Vance, had emailed me instantly. Juliana's reply came back in less than 2 minutes. "It's void. It's fraudulent inducement. He is concealing assets and crimes while asking you to sign. He's just handed us the last nail for his own coffin. Sign it." So I did. I printed a fresh copy, walked back to the library, and, with a steady hand and a contrite smile, I signed my name. I signed away my empire. Marcus snatched the paper, his relief so profound it was almost pathetic. He had his stamp. He had my signature. He was free. I returned to my dressing room. My burner phone buzzed. It was a new text from Juliana. We had been waiting for the court's final order. Juliana had been at the courthouse all day, presenting the last piece of evidence, the post-nup, the final proof of his intent to defraud. The text read, T-4 days. The judge has signed. The emergency petition is granted. Total asset freeze, corporate and personal. The order is stamped and sealed. It becomes effective at 8 p.m. sharp on the night of the ball. I read the words. 8 p.m. That was the schedule. The gala started at 7. Cocktails were at 7:30. The welcome speech, his welcome speech, was at 8 p.m. Juliana's plan was brilliant. He would be on stage, in front of 200 of Boston's most powerful people, just as his financial world ceased to exist. He would be humiliated mid-sentence. It was a perfect, clean, legal execution. But it was not my plan. He wanted to make me a public spectacle. He wanted to kiss his mistress on my red carpet. He wanted to be the one holding the power, the one to declare, "It's done." If the assets froze during his speech, he would be the story. He would be the victim of a sudden corporate implosion. I would be the poor, tragic wife caught in his wake. No, I had not come this far. I had not planned this meticulously, to be a supporting character in my own revenge. I was the architect. I designed his rise, and I would design his fall, and the fall would happen on my terms, on my cue. I picked up the phone. I typed a new message to Juliana. No, that won't work. It's my speech that matters. I looked at the event schedule I still held in my hand. My speech, the keynote, was scheduled for 9 p.m. I texted, "File an amendment. Tell the judge he's a flight risk, but the greater risk is a market panic. Tell her we need to control the narrative. The freeze cannot happen at 8. It has to happen at 9:15 p.m. After my speech begins." I waited. My breath held. This was the real power play, the last-minute change to the script. My phone buzzed. A single word from the wolf. Done. And so, here I was, back in the present, standing by a towering floral arrangement of white orchids that I had personally approved. The glass of sparkling water in my hand was my only prop. I had been inside the grand ballroom of the Lumina Center for exactly 20 minutes, having bypassed the cocktail reception for this quiet moment of observation. The doors from the main lobby opened, and the noise level of the room ticked up. He had arrived. Marcus and Serafina made their grand entrance, not with a formal announcement, but with the sheer gravitational pull of their combined arrogance. They were fresh from the red carpet, flushed with their vulgar victory. Serafina clung to his arm, her red dress a garish stain in the tastefully decorated room. Her face was a mask of triumph, her eyes scanning the crowd, no doubt looking for me, for my reaction. Marcus was even worse. He was beaming, a conqueror, his chest puffed out. He thought he had just fired the opening salvo and won the war. He was the man. He moved through the room, not as a host, but as a new king, accepting congratulations. Though for what? No one was quite sure. I watched him approach table 1, our designated corporate table, where Arthur Wembley and Koji Tanaka were already seated. I held my breath. This was the first test. Arthur, the old-money Bostonian, stood up, a broad, false smile on his face. He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Marcus, my boy." His voice boomed. "What an entrance, you never fail to make a splash." Koji, ever more reserved, simply nodded, his eyes sharp. "A bold move. Marcus, very new." Marcus lapped it up. He laughed, aloud, self-satisfied sound. You know me, gentlemen, always innovating, no time for the past, only the future. His eyes found me then, across the room. He saw me standing alone by the flowers. He gave me a small, pitying smirk. It was the look you give an old piece of furniture before the movers haul it away. He had no idea that Arthur and Koji were not just board members. They were my co-conspirators, and they were playing their parts to perfection. They were lulling the lamb to slaughter. The clock on the grand mantel read 8:50 p.m. The program was beginning. The lights dimmed slightly, and the quiet buzz of conversation died. Our event coordinator, a woman I had been working with for 6 months, stepped to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Marcus and Serafina took their places at the head table, front and center. He had seated her next to him, in the seat that had been mine for 15 years. The coordinator finished her welcome, and then said, "And now, please welcome the man who makes all of this possible, the visionary founder of Thorn Innovations and the Thorn Foundation, Marcus Thorn." A spotlight hit him. The applause was polite but strong. He walked onto the stage, waving, soaking it in. He tapped the microphone. A bit of feedback squealed, and he began. Thank you," he said, his voice smooth, the one I had coached him to use. "Welcome, everyone. What a night. You know, I was just saying to my colleagues, tonight is about the future." He paused, looking out over the crowd, his eyes landing on Serafina. "It's about new beginnings. It's about being bold. It's about taking the risks that others are too afraid to take, because that is how we change the world." The coded message was so obvious it was pathetic. He was talking about her. He was talking about his escape. The room, oblivious, applauded his vision. He held up his hands, magnanimous. "But you all know me. I'm just the ideas guy, the real heart, the real soul of our foundation." "Well, that's my wife." He turned and looked directly at me. The spotlight swung from him and found me in the shadows by the flowers. I was suddenly, blindingly, illuminated. "And now," he said, his voice dripping with a false, condescending affection, "my lovely wife, Eliza, will come up and share a few words about the Foundation's work this year. Eliza." He began to clap, a slow, deliberate, patronizing clap. The room joined in. Every eye was on me. This was it. This was the humiliation. The faithful, clueless wife, trotting up to the stage after her husband had all but announced his infidelity to the entire world. I felt my purse vibrate in my hand. I glanced down. A new text message, on my real phone, the one he knew about. But the sender was a blocked number I had memorized. The message contained one word. "Ready." It was from Juliana. I scanned the back of the ballroom. There, at a small table by the service exit, sat the wolf herself, dressed in an impeccable black suit. She was not alone. She was flanked by 2 tall, broad-shouldered men in simple, dark suits. They were not donors. They were not event security. They were U.S. Marshals, in plain clothes, and they were sipping water, their eyes fixed on the stage. As I took my first step forward, a new sound cut through the applause. A harsh, digital ringing. It was Marcus's phone. He was still on stage, and his personal phone, the one on his hip, was ringing loudly in the silent room. He flinched, annoyed by the interruption. He pulled it from his pocket. I could see the screen from where I stood. The caller ID was not a name. It was a string of numbers, a Swiss country code. It was 9:05 p.m. The banks in Zurich were open for business. The sharks were circling, wondering where their wire transfers were, why his accounts were suddenly non-responsive. He scowled. This was not part of his plan. This was an annoyance. He was missing the main event, my public downfall. With a stab of his thumb, he declined the call. He silenced his phone, shoved it back into his pocket, and turned his full, sneering attention back to me. his smile wider now, more self-satisfied. He had dismissed the most important phone call of his life. He wanted to watch me squirm. I began my walk. It was the longest walk of my life, from the back of the ballroom, across the plush carpet, and up the small set of stairs to the stage. My sapphire dress moved like water around my legs. I felt 200 pairs of eyes on me, all of them filled with pity. They saw the poor, abandoned wife. I reached the stage. Marcus was standing there. "All yours, darling," he whispered, his breath hot with whiskey and triumph as he passed me. I did not look at him. I walked directly to the heavy carved oak podium. I placed my hands on either side of it, gripping the wood. I looked out. The spotlight was blinding. I could not see the crowd, but I could see him. He had retaken his seat at the front table, next to her. Serafina was smiling, a smug, cat-like expression. Marcus leaned in and whispered something in her ear, and she giggled, a high, thin sound. He looked up at me. He was still smiling. He was waiting for my voice to break. He was waiting for the tears. He was waiting for his final, perfect victory. I gripped the podium, the carved wood digging into my palms. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, a heavy, pressurized void. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on me, and in every one, I saw the same look of painful, humiliating pity. They saw the wronged wife, the pathetic victim, the woman who was about to break down in front of all of Boston. I took a slow, deliberate breath, tasting the expensive, filtered air. I leaned toward the microphone. My voice, when it came, was not the fractured whisper they expected. It was not weak. It was not trembling. It was clear, and it was cold, and it was amplified to perfection, reaching every corner of the room. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my eyes finding his at the front table. I smiled. It was not the polite, strained smile he had seen for months. It was a wide, bright, terrifyingly real smile. "Thank you for that incredibly generous introduction. You are absolutely right. Tonight is about the future. It is about new beginnings." I let the words hang there, a toast to his own secret toast. At the front table, he smirked, leaning back in his chair, ready for the tears. "My husband, the visionary," I continued, my voice smooth, "has taught me so much over our 15 years. More than anything, he has taught me about value." I saw a few people nod politely. They thought this was a compliment. He taught me, for example, the precise value of our groundbreaking green technology patents, the very soul of Thorne Innovations. I paused, my gaze sweeping the room. "He taught me that their true value is, apparently, whatever pittance you can get for them when you illegally sell them to your own secret shell companies in Liechtenstein." The silence that followed was not just silence. It was a physical impact. The hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. I saw the lead violinist, her bow hovering over her instrument, freeze. I saw Arthur Wembley's face remain impassive, as practiced, and I saw Marcus, his head snapped up. The arrogant, pitying smirk did not fade. It shattered. It was a grotesque mask of confusion, his brain processing my words, his eyes wide, disbelieving. I did not give him a moment to breathe. I pressed on, my voice still light, conversational, as if I were discussing the catering. "He also taught me so much about charity," I said. My gaze shifted, moving past my husband's stunned face and landing, like a sniper's laser, on the woman in the red dress beside him. "He taught me that charity can be so personal, so intimate. For instance, the way he has so charitably been embezzling funds from this foundation money, meant for clean water and endangered species, and funneling it directly into the personal bank accounts of Miss Serafina Rivers, sitting right there." A collective gasp swept the room. It was sharp, a single, indrawn breath. And then, A sound, the sharp, crystal clink and splash as Seraphina's hand, which had been raising her champagne flute, spasmed. The glass fell from her fingers, emptying champagne onto the pristine white tablecloth and her own dress. Her face, moments ago so triumphant, was a mask of ashen white terror. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. "Eliza." Marcus's voice was a low roar. He was pushing his chair back, his face a mottled, ugly shade of purple. He was halfway out of his seat. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "I'm giving my speech, darling," I said, my voice ringing with an authority no one in this room had ever heard from me. "And I'm not finished." He lunged. He was actually trying to get to the stage, to silence me. "I wouldn't," I said calmly. Before he could take a second step, the two men in dark suits at Juliana's table were on him. They moved with a speed that was fluid and terrifying. They were not event security. They were the U.S. Marshals. One man placed a heavy, immovable hand on Marcus's chest, the other on his shoulder, and slammed him back down into his seat with a force that made the chair legs shriek on the polished floor. "Mr. Thorne," one of them said, his voice low but carrying, "please remain seated. The lady is speaking." Marcus stared at the men, then at me, and in his eyes, for the first time, I saw it. Not anger, not arrogance, just pure, undiluted fear. He finally understood. This was not a domestic dispute. This was an execution. I turned back to the podium, to the stunned, silent crowd. As I was saying, when a CEO is this generous with his company's assets, the law has a name for it. It's called securities fraud. It's called embezzlement. It's called racketeering. And it turns out the courts take these things very, very seriously. The room was a sea of phones, all raised, all recording. So, to honor my husband's flagrant, widespread, and quite frankly, stupid criminal behavior, I have a very special announcement to make. As of 9 a.m. this morning, the Massachusetts High Court, presented with irrefutable evidence of this massive fraud, issued an emergency judicial order. I leaned into the microphone. I wanted to savor this. The court has granted me, Eliza Vance, temporary and total controlling interest of all corporate and personal assets of Thorne Innovations and the Thorne Foundation. The room did not applaud. It exploded. It was a physical detonation of sound. Shouts. "Oh my God! Did she say fraud?" I held up one hand, and the room, desperate for the finale, fell silent once more. "And now," I said, my voice ringing with a joy that was so cold and so pure it was almost holy. As the new acting president and sole signatory of the Thorne Foundation, I would like to fulfill our mission. I am making the single largest donation in this foundation's history. I looked right at Marcus. He was no longer a man. He was a void. He was a gray, hollowed-out shell, his face slack, his eyes dead. I am hereby donating the entirety of Marcus Thorne's frozen assets, an estimated $180 million, to the very environmental conservation groups he has been stealing from for the last year. The chaos that erupted was absolute. People were on their feet. The press, who had been clustered at the back, surged forward, their cameras flashing, a frantic, blinding strobe. Seraphina was openly sobbing, her hands over her face. And Marcus simply collapsed. He slumped forward in his chair, his head hitting the table with a dull thud, a ruined king at his own ruined feast. The cameras were on him, but I knew they would be on me next. I found the main broadcast lens, the red light glowing. I looked right at it. "That, Marcus," I said, my voice a quiet promise in the center of the storm, "is how you make a new beginning." I did not wait for questions. I did not wait for the applause that was now, finally, beginning to thunder through the room. I carefully, calmly, placed the microphone back in its holder. I turned, my sapphire gown flowing behind me, and walked off the stage. I walked past the marshals who were now cuffing Serafina, past Juliana, who gave me a single approving nod, and I did not look back. I left my husband to the authorities. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious to know where in the world you are listening from. Please comment below and let's connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, I invite you to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and give us your support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.